Who he is, so we'll skip any other introduction and turn the program over to Burt Rutan to talk about predictions.
How many here have been to Oshkosh since 1971 or longer? Wow! We've got some old timers. So you probably heard hundreds of talks that I've given at Oshkosh over that time period of 38 years or so. I usually talk about home-built airplanes, at least I did in the past. Sometimes we'll talk about government research and development and so on. This year, I decided that I'm talking about a couple of other things that are extremely important to the country. And I've selected some interesting topics. Today's topic is going to be about predictions. Now, I don't want you to think that this title is my research on the most important predictions in the world. This is a very personal thing. I'm going to tell you about the predictions that Burt Rutan has made throughout his whole life that I thought would be of interest to you. And for full disclosure, I'm going to tell you right up front, I was wrong on almost every one. So if I predict something that's off in the future, you know, most of this is stuff that I predicted that didn't come true. But if I predict something off in the future, please note that before you go and take it to the bank, I don't have a very good track record on it. But I think some of the stuff's kind of interesting. And what I'm trying to do, like on Tuesday, I talked about a whole bunch of hobbies that I have. Okay? What I'm trying to do is to give you a better feeling of what's inside a guy who's spent his whole life on aerospace development. Now, I have, but how many people here have ever been to Mojave, California? Okay? Now, so about a quarter of this crowd realizes that you cannot live in Mojave, California, and only do airplanes. Well, you're forced to do only airplanes. But any other kind of life that you have outside of developing and testing the airplanes and developing them for your various customers, your hobbies, your recreation, your seeking out culture. How many of those people like the culture? Oh, you like jackrabbits? Okay, that's good. Okay, but at any rate, I have for my whole life have had all kinds of hobbies, and I'll look at something that says really interesting, and I'll do a tremendous amount of research. I'm not just talking about looking at published literature. I'll look at unpublished stuff. I'll travel around the world and meet interesting people that are involved in this kind of stuff. And to me, it's fun. Solving a mystery has always been fun. None of my hobbies have been a lifetime sort of thing. I'll usually stay with them for 3 or 4 years and then go on to something else. But anyway, let's get on with Burt Rutan's predictions. Oh, I'm driving this thing. This is not Burt Rutan's predictions. This first one's 1850 in the British Artisan magazine that talked about the possibility of having men flying in airplanes. Keep in mind, 1850, it says if air travel is to supersede present travel, the slowest speed in the airplane must be equal to the quickest locomotive. Well, that makes sense, right? You know, they had balloons then. We're talking about airplanes. So it said the slowest number, we've got to go 60 miles an hour or it doesn't make any sense. So they've done a bunch of calculations. They said even a 10-ton one, which would be light, would require 2,188 horses to drive it. And of course, any mechanic can tell that that's absolutely impossible. Wing flapping. I looked at a big study on wing flapping, and they concluded it would take 106 men doing their best to support one man in the air. Powered balloons. Well, they fly around, low power, but they don't go very fast, so they're not practical. It says except for the novelty of the thing. But if you went 60 miles an hour, it required 237 horses, which would tear the balloon in shreds. You know, actually, that was pretty true. It's pretty close for 1850, isn't it? After describing a real complex mechanical design to too lengthy here, but it's complex. It says, there is no known power capable of competing with the elements, electricity excepted. You know, in those days, electricity was the nuclear power of the age. Okay? But it will be 1,000 years, may yet elapse, ere this power be developed. 1850. On flight at high altitude, they say the Creator has intended that it never should be so, because you don't have as much oxygen as you get up there. And I really like this quote. It says, few persons could exist, and there are many who find the ordinary atmosphere hardly sufficient for the voice. Another thing they talked about, hey, it's cold as you go by. And you'd be thrust in a few minutes from the middle of summer to the depth of winter. This would be an injurious effect on the human systems. Our ingenuity should be taxed to lessen our ills instead of being misdirected to the unattainable. Okay, let's fast forward to a wonderful book. I bought this book in Oshkosh in a little bookstore and paid $100 for it. And it is an absolutely precious book. It's written by Victor Lockheed. That's actually Lockheed. They spelled their name differently in those days. And it was written in 1912. 1912 was 4 years after the Wright brothers flew in Paris. You know, when the world realized that hey, man can fly heavier than air. Wow, this is cool. The stuff that was done between 1908 and the start of World War I believe is the most important time for airplanes. It went from nobody flying to airplanes, hundreds of airplanes being developed in 39 countries. And they didn't even have the internet. I don't know how no, they did that. In 39 countries in 4 years, from 08 to 12, 39 countries were building airplanes. There were factories in France that built 500 airplanes a year. In France, in 1912. How much does Beach build? Oh, well. Okay, on the future of airplanes for military use. They thought this was the big use at the time is for war. Modern warfare is a manufacturing proposition, a cold-blooded problem of economically making corpses out of the enemy's men and ruins of his possessions. Isn't that a cool statement? Make corpses out of the enemy and ruin their possessions. You know, that puts war in a different perspective than most people nowadays think about it. You know, America's not at war. The military's at war. America's at the mall. That's a big difference with what war is now. That's why these folk don't understand what war is and how important it is. It doesn't affect them. Okay, anyway, military planners have suffered disquieting visions of maneuvering unseen at night a veritable swarm of 20,000 airplanes, costing no more than a single dreadnought, dropping bombs over cities and palaces at night. 20,000 airplanes dropping bombs at night. It's scary, you know, right? That's why the military for war. Okay, now, in those days, artillery didn't have the kind of guidance that we had. It didn't even have tracer. You fire a bullet, and you watch the dust and see where it hit, and then you make an adjustment. So you have to have the ground close to your target in order to be able to readjust your sight to hit your target. Now think about it. Now the problem is we got to shoot at an airplane. You can't tell where that bullet went because it disappears. Right? That's what you had in those days instead of the cool stuff that we have now. To strike a maneuvering vehicle moving through the air with no means of finding the range can never happen except by the purest of accidents. And when it does happen, its effect on the enemy's strength is utterly trivial, involving the destruction of no more than a few $100s of machinery and the lives of not more than 1 or 2 people. That its futility as a means of winning a victory is almost too evident to require discussion. In other words, it's futile to try to shoot down an enemy's airplane. That's kind of cool. I found that in this cool little book. Okay.